Oh, I think I recall we'll have to go to a member for Barwon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It is well known that regional New South Wales is suffering from a long-term chronic shortage of medical professionals and health services. It has been that way for decades. While we await the findings of the recent inquiry into regional health, we already know there are obvious reasons why health outcomes are so poor. The sparse population means private medical professionals or institutions don't have the lucrative client base they might have in large cities or towns, so it is harder to establish a viable health service. It is also harder to attract medical professionals to public health in regional areas, although we welcome initiatives like the announcement today by the Federal Regional Health Minister of a $708 million specialist training program, which provides incentives for doctors to work in regional areas. But even if there are schemes being implemented to get more specialists out west, there is still the immediate problem of isolation in many communities and individual patients, which makes it difficult for many people to travel to seek medical treatment. People who live in the city can never really understand the desperate situation that sometimes ensues when a person who is ill has to decide whether they can afford to travel to get medical help. Many either wait until their condition becomes life-threatening or don't go at all and suffer in silence. Ultimately, many medical problems that could have been easily dealt with wind up becoming worse. So it is up to government to try and fill the gaps in some way. In fact, it is the government's interest to help get regional residents to medical treatment because, as they say, an ounce of prevention, it beats a pound of cure. It is better to take on the small burden of getting people to early treatment of treatable conditions than to see those patients become a bigger burden as their condition gets worse. While incentives to get more medical professionals to move to the country is a longer-term solution to the gaps in medical services in the regions, that will take time to achieve. Most people who live in regional areas have realistic expectations regarding access to health services. They don't expect there to be top-flight cardiologists, oncologists, osteopaths and neurosurgeons on every corner, or a multi-storey, fully equipped modern hospital in every town. But if the health services can't be provided locally, the government at least needs to provide ways for people to travel to the services they need. The existing scheme for transport, the Isolated Patients Travel and Accommodation Assistance Scheme, or IPTAAS, this scheme subsidises travel to the tune of 22 cents per kilometre for private car travel, which is not generous to begin with, but now with the upwards pressure on fuel prices, it seems even more inadequate. The scheme does offer full reimbursement for public transport, albeit minus GST, and again for air travel minus GST. Taxis are reimbursed at a rate of $20 for 1 day, then $40 for a 2 to 7 day appointment, $80 for an 8 to 14 day appointment, and $160 for 15 or more days. While it could be argued that that's better than nothing, it could almost certainly be much better than it is. Many other schemes that compensate people for mileage set the rate at the ATO rate at 72 cents per kilometre. IPTAAS seems paltry by comparison. When patients arrive at a town where they will have their treatment, they also need accommodation. So IPTAAS subsidises accommodation for 1 to 7 nights at $43 a night for a single occupant, and additional nights at $65 or $85 if you're staying with the person who escorted you. That's at a not-for-profit venue. The rates are not much better. Even at commercial venues, even though the price of the accommodation is likely to be much higher. It is not too much to ask that people who are seeking treatment should have some of their financial pain alleviated. We're not talking about sending people around in limousines and housing them in luxury for a nice holiday. These are people who have their own distresses to deal with, and they deserve to have some of their burden relieved. They deserve to have some of their costs defrayed, but the existing scheme no longer cuts it. It is well past time that the government took a look at the obvious shortfall. Of all the electorates in New South Wales, nowhere is this problem more acute than mine. There is no other electorate in the state that has the vast distances of Barwon. In February last year, during question time, I asked the Health Minister for a review of IPTAAS, which even then fell short for many people. He agreed to report back in 6 months. While I understand that when that promise was given, we were enjoying a brief lull in the pandemic, and that later that year, when the Minister's 6-month deadline drew near, we saw some of the worst outbreaks of COVID. It is now, Mr Speaker, over a year. In February last year, the review was a pressing enough issue, but hopefully now the Minister realises that the current inflationary pressures will be even more adversely affecting those people who have to cross vast distances for medical treatment. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call the member for Coffs Harbour.